Florida was supposed to be untouchable, the land of sunshine, billion-dollar beaches, and endless tourists. But behind the palm trees, something terrifying is happening. Homes are sitting empty, hotels are bleeding cash. Over $64 billion in revenue has vanished. Thousands of jobs disappeared in a matter of months. Streets once packed with snowbirds now echo with silence. Politicians brag about record numbers, but locals see boarded-up shops and for sale signs. This isn't a downturn, it's a collapse. The empire of paradise is cracking under its own weight, and for the first time in modern history, Florida's dream is starting to die. Florida's housing market, once the symbol of American sunshine wealth, is now collapsing under its own glitter. Across the state, more than 180,000 homes sit unsold, the highest number in recorded history. In cities like Tampa and Orlando, for sale signs line neighborhoods like silent tombstones. Prices that once soared past $500,000 are slipping fast, with listings staying on the market twice as long as last year. What used to sell in 2 weeks now takes 6 months, if it sells at all. The dream of quick profit has turned into a nightmare of unpaid mortgages and rising taxes. Insurance companies have become executioners in this collapse. Premiums that cost $2,400 a few years ago now exceed $8,000 annually for a modest 3-bedroom home. Some coastal homeowners report premiums jumping to $12,000 or even $15,000, wiping out retirement savings and forcing them to sell, or simply walk away. Many can't even find insurers willing to cover their homes after back-to-back hurricane seasons caused billions in damage. For them, homeownership now means holding an asset that no one wants and no one can afford to protect. Condo owners are facing an equally brutal storm. After the Surfside collapse, Florida passed strict building safety laws that forced older buildings to undergo expensive recertifications. The result? Monthly condo fees that once averaged $400 skyrocketed to over $1,200 in 2025. Elderly residents who spent decades paying off their units suddenly find themselves drowning in maintenance costs higher than rent in New York City. In Broward County alone, over 22% of condos are now listed for sale, with buyers demanding massive discounts. Developers who once bragged about unstoppable demand are now slashing prices and offering desperate incentives. Free pools, luxury appliances, even cars, just to move inventory. But it's not working. Florida's population growth has stalled, and those who can afford to leave are heading to cheaper, safer states. Meanwhile, ghost subdivisions sprawl across once booming towns, filled with half-built dreams and financial ruin. The state that once defined the American real estate fantasy now stands as its cruelest irony. In Florida, paradise isn't being sold, it's being abandoned. When a housing market crumbles, it's tragic. But when Florida's tourism engine begins to seize, that's catastrophic. The same state that once welcomed 134 million visitors a year now finds itself gasping for survival as the very foundation of its economy erodes. Hotels that once operated at 90% occupancy during peak season are running at barely 62%, forcing staff layoffs and silent lobbies that echo like empty cathedrals of capitalism. The illusion of record tourism numbers crumbles when you realize what's behind them. Fewer real tourists, more drive-thrus, and inflated data built to protect political narratives rather than struggling workers. The decline isn't an accident, it's a symptom of a deeper rot spreading through Florida's economy. Every lost traveler represents more than a canceled vacation. It's a missing lifeline for an entire ecosystem of small businesses. Restaurant revenues have plunged by 28% since early 2025. Local attraction operators in Orlando and Miami report their lowest profit margins since the pandemic, with some closing after 40 years in business. Even airports, the traditional barometers of tourism health, are recording declines. International arrivals down 14%. Canadian visitors down nearly 100,000 in a single year. Each percentage point lost translates into thousands of empty hotel rooms, idle taxis, and paychecks that never arrive. Behind those numbers lies a quiet but devastating truth. Florida's global reputation is fading. Political instability, harsh immigration policies, and reckless rhetoric have transformed what was once America's welcome mat into a cautionary tale. Tourists are choosing Mexico, Portugal, and the Caribbean, destinations offering sun without suspicion, safety without politics, warmth without warning signs. And this downturn doesn't stay confined to theme parks or beach resorts. It spreads like saltwater intrusion into Florida's broader economy. Retail, transportation, and real estate all feed on tourism's pulse. When that pulse weakens, everything slows. Consumer spending across major metro areas has already dropped 9.4%, the steepest decline in the Southeast. Businesses that depend on tourism dollars, from cleaning services to grocery suppliers, are caught in the undertow. The connection to the housing collapse becomes painfully clear. Empty hotels mean fewer workers, fewer renters, and collapsing demand for new housing. Florida's two great pillars, property and tourism, are cracking in perfect unison. One bleeds concrete, the other bleeds cash, and both expose the same truth. The empire of endless growth was never sustainable. It was a mirage built on borrowed money, fragile optimism, and the assumption that paradise could never fail. Now it's failing, spectacularly. The cracks in Florida's economy turned into fractures when its most loyal visitors, the Snowbirds, stopped showing up. For decades, Canadian retirees poured billions into the state each winter, renting condos, dining nightly, and fueling small-town economies that lived off their seasonal rhythm. But in 2025, that rhythm broke. Visitor data shows a 13% decline in Canadian arrivals, the steepest drop since 2009. Roughly 3.3 million Canadians used to migrate south each year. Today, almost half are choosing other destinations. That single shift has erased nearly $9 billion in seasonal spending from Florida's coastal counties. This isn't just about tourism. It's about economic oxygen being sucked from the room. Snowbirds were never typical tourists. They were part-time residents who kept Florida's off-season alive. Their absence means months of shuttered restaurants, silent marinas, and rental properties turning into financial liabilities. Cities like Fort Lauderdale, Naples, and Clearwater built their tax base around this seasonal economy. With the migration disrupted, sales tax collections in those regions have already fallen 7% year over year, pushing local budgets to the edge. Why did they leave? The answer is geopolitical toxicity. Years of inflammatory rhetoric, trade tension, and policy chaos turned the United States into an uncomfortable destination. Travel advisories from multiple countries now warn citizens to exercise caution in visiting America, citing immigration detentions, unpredictable law enforcement, and rising hostility toward foreigners. For retirees seeking peace and affordability, that warning is enough to look elsewhere. Portugal, the Canary Islands, Mexico, places that offer the same sun without the anxiety. Florida's leadership failed to understand how fragile its reputation truly was. Tourism isn't a guaranteed resource, it's a trust-based relationship. Once that trust is broken, no discount flight or marketing campaign can rebuild it. The state's dependence on international visitors was always treated as an endless goldmine, but now that mine is collapsing in on itself. Hotels that catered exclusively to snowbirds are converting into long-term rentals or going bankrupt altogether. Entire coastal economies are reconfiguring in panic, unsure who they're serving anymore. The withdrawal of international money now exposes Florida's over-leveraged core. Property markets inflated by foreign cash are deflating. Tourism-dependent counties are seeing unemployment rise, and local banks tied to seasonal businesses are tightening credit. The dominoes set in motion by this withdrawal lead directly into Florida's broader economic freefall, a collapse not of tourism alone, but of confidence itself. Every economic collapse begins with a single failure of leadership. Florida's crisis didn't erupt from a hurricane or a market crash. It was engineered through arrogance, nationalism, and weaponized politics. The same rhetoric that promised freedom and prosperity has now infected the state's financial bloodstream, turning it toxic. Foreign investors who once viewed Florida as a safe haven for capital are quietly pulling out. Global funds managing over $400 billion have reclassified Florida as a high-risk region. not because of natural disasters, but because of political instability. Tourism is diplomacy in disguise, and Florida's leaders forgot that. When top officials dismissed international partners and ridiculed foreign visitors, they didn't just insult individuals, they dismantled decades of economic trust. The ripple effect is visible in real numbers. International investment in Florida's hospitality sector is down 22% from 2024, and cross-border property transactions have collapsed by nearly 40%. This is not coincidence, it's consequence. No investor wants to pour money into a region that treats its global allies like liabilities. The political environment has also crushed confidence domestically. Developers, insurers, and business owners are caught in a tug-of-war between contradictory regulations and performative leadership. One side shouts about economic freedom, while simultaneously expanding bureaucracy. The result is paralysis. Projects frozen mid-construction, banks tightening credit, and corporations suspending hiring. Economic chaos disguised as ideology. Each misstep reinforces the previous chapter's collapse. Housing markets depend on perception of stability. Tourism depends on perception of safety. Both now depend on political narratives that have gone rogue. The world watches Florida's officials celebrate record numbers, while satellite data shows energy consumption and business activity declining. It's theater, a government reciting prosperity while its cities quietly decay. The emotional cost is heavier than the financial one. Ordinary Floridians are trapped between propaganda and reality. They are told everything is fine while their rents rise, their customers vanish, and their communities shrink. They watch policies made for applause rather than survival. And beneath every speech, every press conference, every flag-waving promise, the state's economic arteries are closing. Florida's downfall isn't just a state issue. It's a global case study in how political vanity can destroy an economy faster than any natural disaster. It is the point where leadership turned from governance into spectacle, and the price of that performance is now measured in empty homes, bankrupt businesses, and a disappearing middle class. The cracks are no longer invisible. The facade of record growth has disintegrated into a spreadsheet of denial. Florida's government continues to announce historic milestones, yet behind the headlines lies data so grim that even state economists refuse to comment publicly. Retail spending has dropped 11% statewide, business tax receipts are falling month after month, and airport passenger counts have slipped below pre-pandemic averages for the first time since 2020. Every indicator points in one direction: downward. Corporations that once flooded Florida with optimism are now quietly retreating. Hotel chains are delaying expansions. Airlines are cutting routes. Even convention organizers, the lifeblood of urban tourism, are canceling bookings due to low attendance forecasts. Internal financial reports from the hospitality sector show net profitability plummeting from 41% to 29% in just 12 months. That's not a slowdown. It's a collapse disguised by press releases and selective statistics. The illusion of prosperity survives through manipulated metrics. Florida counts every passerby, truck driver, and business traveler as a visitor, padding numbers while genuine tourism contracts sharply. Economic growth reports still include disaster repair spending and emergency insurance payouts as positive activity, hiding the truth that Florida's real economy, the one built on tourism, housing, and consumer confidence, is in freefall. The emotional impact is profound. Residents can sense the decay even if officials won't acknowledge it. Parking lots once full of rental cars now sit half empty. Storefronts along major coastlines display the same haunting symbol: available. It's a quiet catastrophe, not a dramatic implosion, but a suffocating decline measured in unpaid bills, disappearing customers, and exhausted optimism. Everything ties back to the chapters before. Political mismanagement poisoned confidence, international distrust drained capital, and the housing implosion removed the last safety net. What remains is a mirage of prosperity projected through slogans, while Florida quietly bleeds beneath the surface. This isn't recession, it's the anatomy of denial, a slow-motion economic collapse that those in power refuse to name. An economy doesn't collapse in spreadsheets. It collapses in people. Florida's downfall has turned into a humanitarian crisis, hidden behind palm trees and political speeches. Tens of thousands of workers across tourism, housing, and retail now face a financial vacuum that numbers alone can't express. In the first half of 2025, thousands of hospitality jobs vanished, while part-time employment in coastal regions fell 18%. Behind every statistic lies unpaid rent, defaulted loans, and families slicing grocery lists in half to survive. This implosion isn't confined to low-wage workers. Middle-income earners, the teachers, nurses, property managers, and small entrepreneurs are the new casualties. Wage growth in Florida has flatlined at 1.4%, while inflation remains above 4.8%, erasing real purchasing power. Once affordable cities like Sarasota or Fort Myers now mirror the cost burdens of Los Angeles, but without the income cushion. Local governments, desperate to cover shrinking tax bases, have raised property levies and service fees, compounding the pain for already fragile households. The psychological fallout is severe. Consumer confidence has plunged to its lowest point in 2 decades. Foreclosure filings are up 62% year over year, and small business bankruptcies have doubled since last summer. Entire neighborhoods once sustained by tourism revenue are hollowing out, an invisible migration driven not by opportunity, but by despair. The Sunshine State's glow has turned into glare, exposing the economic rot that optimism once concealed. Each chapter of this collapse feeds directly into the next. Political toxicity dismantled investor trust, that erosion drained tourism, and the housing market absorbed the final shock. The people caught in between, the workers, retirees, and small business owners, carry the full weight of decisions they never made. They aren't facing a temporary slump. They are living through a structural breakdown. Florida's economic model was built on constant expansion, perpetual visitors, and borrowed stability. Remove even one of those pillars and everything trembles. Remove all three, and what remains is this: the human face of collapse. The world sees sunshine. Florida's residents see survival. Florida's crisis has reached a stage where the collapse is no longer theoretical. It's structural. Every economic pillar that once sustained the state is now under simultaneous strain. Growth has turned to contraction, confidence to fear. The illusion of stability is shattered, replaced by a quiet recognition that the damage is deeper than anyone dares to admit. This is the perfect storm economists warned about. Soaring insurance premiums, a housing market in freefall, foreign capital in retreat, declining tourism, and a government still pretending everything is fine. Florida's GDP growth, which stood at 3.4% in 2023, has slipped below 1% in mid-2025, the sharpest deceleration of any major U.S. state. The real problem is that every sector now feeds the next in a chain reaction of contraction. When tourism slows, restaurants close. When businesses fail, property values fall. When property values fall, tax revenues dry up, forcing cuts to schools, hospitals, and local programs. Florida's counties have collectively lost over $6.7 billion in projected tax income since 2024, with coastal cities bearing the brunt. Infrastructure upgrades have stalled, hurricane preparedness budgets have been slashed, and public sector employment is shrinking for the first time since the Great Recession. The so-called boom state is running out of cash and credibility. Investors who once viewed Florida as a symbol of resilience now use it as a warning. Bank of America's internal risk assessment classified South Florida's mortgage exposure as unstable, predicting that by late 2026, nearly 15% of outstanding loans in high-risk flood zones could default. The insurance sector is even more fragile. 6 major insurers have withdrawn entirely from the Florida market since 2023, forcing homeowners into state-backed programs that are themselves nearing insolvency. Citizens Property Insurance, the state's insurer of last resort, has seen claims rise 240% in 18 months, a pace that financial regulators describe as unsustainable beyond 2026. When risk becomes uninsurable, property becomes worthless. and the housing market becomes a liability instead of an asset. This spiral has begun to manifest in the broader financial system. Regional banks holding commercial mortgages in Florida's coastal zones report delinquency rates rising above 8.5%, double the national average. Retail centers in Orlando, Naples, and Fort Lauderdale are operating at 70% occupancy, a level unseen since 2009. Developers with multi-million-dollar projects are pausing construction mid-foundation as capital dries up. Investors describe the mood as frozen. Money refuses to move because nobody trusts the outcome. The sunshine economy has become an economic permafrost. The deeper tragedy, however, is that this was avoidable. Florida's collapse was not caused by one catastrophic event, but by a series of deliberate choices, each made to protect short-term image rather than long-term stability. Policymakers chose to underfund resilience projects while expanding tax cuts for luxury real estate. They minimized the risks of climate exposure, dismissed warnings from insurance analysts, and glorified an economy built entirely on speculation and tourism. When international tensions erupted and tourism dollars vanished, there was nothing left beneath the surface. No diversified industry, no manufacturing base, no fallback plan. In a state of 22 million people, nearly 1 in 3 jobs is directly or indirectly tied to travel and hospitality. Remove that pillar, and everything shakes. The result is a state caught between denial and decay. Business associations plead for federal aid, while officials insist that everything is under control. Yet the numbers betray the truth. Average household savings in Florida have dropped by 22% in a single year. Credit card delinquency rates have climbed to 7.4%, their highest since 2011. Across Miami-Dade County, 31% of households now spend more than half their income on housing, up from 24% just 2 years ago. Behind these statistics lies a psychological exhaustion that no stimulus check can cure. Residents are no longer dreaming of prosperity. They're simply trying to endure. The collapse feeds itself through perception. Negative headlines drive investors away, reducing liquidity. Lower investment fuels layoffs, which create more negative headlines. Social media amplifies the despair. Drone footage of empty beaches, deserted malls, and half-built high-rises goes viral with captions like "Florida's Ghost Coast." Perception becomes reality, and once that spiral starts, no PR campaign can reverse it. Even Florida's once mighty theme park industry has been forced to adapt. Attendance at major attractions has fallen 9.3% year-to-date, prompting cost-cutting, shortened hours, and hiring freezes. The world's most visited tourist destination is quietly losing its ability to attract visitors, and the silence is deafening. At the human level, migration trends reveal a deeper transformation. For the first time in decades, more Americans are leaving Florida than moving in from other states. Net domestic migration turned negative in early 2025, with 47,000 residents departing between January and July. Many cite unaffordable housing, rising crime, or insurance collapse. But underneath lies a single truth. Faith in Florida's promise has evaporated. What used to be marketed as the land of endless opportunity is now whispered about as the next California, a paradise priced beyond reach, teetering on environmental and economic disaster. The political establishment continues to respond with denial and distraction. Leaders hold press conferences celebrating token job gains, while ignoring that those gains are concentrated in low-pay, high-turnover sectors. The gap between rhetoric and reality widens daily, and the public can feel it. Polling across the state shows only 27% of Floridians believe their local economy will improve within a year, the lowest optimism rating in U.S. state surveys. Confidence has become a casualty of overconfidence. The emotional texture of this collapse is haunting. You can measure GDP loss, but you can't quantify the sound of silence inside a hotel lobby that once hummed with voices. You can count unemployment claims, but you can't chart the erosion of trust between citizens and their government. Economic decline has a rhythm, a slow fade of motion, a softening of ambition, a quiet acceptance that things will not return to normal. That rhythm now beats through every corner of the state, from Orlando's empty retail centers to the vacant condominiums overlooking Biscayne Bay. The global implications are also profound. Florida was not just a destination, it was a symbol of American optimism sold worldwide. Investors in London, Toronto, and Berlin saw it as proof that the US economy could still create wealth from lifestyle and climate. Its fall sends a different message: that political recklessness, environmental neglect, and dependency on fragile sectors can erode even the most resilient image. Economists now warn that if Florida's downturn accelerates, it could shave 0.3 percentage points off national GDP in 2026. The Florida effect is no longer about tourism, it's about contagion. And yet, amid the statistics, there's a final, unspoken layer: the collapse of identity. For generations, Florida sold the myth that sunshine was prosperity, that warm weather meant endless growth. Now the same climate brings storms that bankrupt insurers and heat waves that drive up energy bills by 26% year over year. The very environment that built the brand has turned against it. Nature, economics, and politics have converged into one crisis that can't be spun, ignored, or escaped. This isn't just the story of one state. It's a preview of America's next reckoning. A place that grew too fast, ignored too much, and believed its own marketing until the reality became impossible to hide. The numbers, the headlines, and the empty storefronts all say the same thing: Florida's golden age has ended. The empire of sunshine is dimming, not in a single explosion, but in a relentless fade. The real tragedy is that collapse rarely announces itself. It happens quietly: one delayed payment, one canceled booking, one investor withdrawing at a time. Until one day, you look around and realize that the world's favorite vacation spot has become a monument to what happens when confidence dies before the economy does. Florida isn't facing the biggest collapse in US history because of bad luck. It's collapsing because of arrogance, denial, and the simple truth that no empire, no matter how warm, wealthy, or golden, can survive once it starts believing its own illusion.